Welcome to 20 Minute Tabletop, a podcast about board card and miniature gaming. I've got a guest on the show called Rowan, who's the executive producer at Sega Europe, the video games company. Now, I've known Rowan for many, many years, but I only thought to contact him about the show recently when I was talking about Terraria, I've never been sure how to pronounce it, on the cast we did about new games on the Expo. I started really thinking about this crossover between video games and board games and how there was increasingly an interconnection between the both of them. Slay the Spire, for example, a recent game that I enjoyed as a video game, I've noticed is now being transported into a board game when really it feels like it should have been a board game first, being a deck building game. And there's games like Among Us, which is social deduction essentially, that was popularized in a video game. And then there are games that blur the boundaries between what is a video game and what is a board game, like Detective, a modern crime board game, which uses apps. And then you've got other games like XCOM, which I believe originated as a video game, but then moved into the board game sphere using technology as well. So it's a really interesting space. And to be honest with you, Rowan and I only start touching on the surface of this big topic in the podcast. But we also go on to talk a lot about his newfound love, which is Dorfromantik. And I'm going to pass you straight off into this conversation now so you can join us and hopefully you'll enjoy what you listen to. Right, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Taffler, on 20 Minute Tabletop.
Nice to see you. I've actually been listening to pretty much all of these, and I love it. In fact, your very first one was about Thirsty Meeples down in Oxford, and I've actually been there, and it's a very, very great board game cafe. So, yeah, I'm listening to this a lot, really loving the podcast so far.
Yeah, I apologise that it was unkind of me because it was actually your copy of One Night Ultimate Werewolf that you accidentally left at my house. I then went on to say I didn't really like it on a podcast. What's your take on that game?
I love social deduction games, but I think One Night Ultimate Werewolf is like the most pure version of it. It's like condensed down. It's like a shot of tequila. It's the first sort of thing that you do when you start drinking, right? It's like you slam it down, you're doing that proper condensed experience of social deduction. And I love it for that. But I think there's a lot of other social deduction games that are great as well. I love Avalon. I want to play Dead of Winter. I think it's one of my favourite genres of board games. Yeah. Even though I'm really bad at them.
Yeah, and by condense you mean it's because it's a 5-minute timer, off you go, work out what's happening, rather than a slightly longer, drawn-out affair of social deduction.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not over a sort of long period of time sort of integrating with other stuff. It's immediately there. People start shouting at each other, people start engaging with each other. I think probably the social deduction game that I've enjoyed maybe the most is one that's almost completely the opposite, that stretches it out to not just, a 5-minute game, not just a half-hour game, but to possibly days. And that is a game, it's nuts. It's a game called Don't Get Got by Big Potato Games.
Yeah.
Right? I think we played this when we went to Manchester once with a bunch of old university friends. It kind of integrates into the rest of your social group. So you have 6 secret tasks that you have to try and complete before anyone else completes there. And it might be something as simple as get someone to look inside a hat that you're wearing. Or it might be hide this card inside a tin of biscuits and get someone to find it there, or get someone to say something in a foreign language. But the thing is that it's not as though you're doing this within a board game, because you're going about your day, you're going about your life. And then you're just trying to get people to do these things without noticing that they're doing it. And so you get to this point where you're just constantly playing the game and people are asking you to do strange things or even very normal things. And the level of distrust that's there. So why are you asking to make a cup of tea? What does this mean? What's your game? It's the most stressful and yet the most fun social deduction game that I had ever played. It's so much fun.
Now, obviously, Rowan, I have asked you on the podcast today not to talk about social deduction games, although I did enjoy that little digression. It's because you work for a video game company that a lot of people will have heard of. You work for Sega as an executive producer. I had a quick check of your LinkedIn, and I must say, I wasn't really going to go here, but I want to ask you, what is the difference between an executive producer and just a mere producer?
So the difference really is just about the level of supervision that there is. I have producers that work in my team, and they will be working on projects on a much more sort of day-to-day project management level. And I kind of have almost that 1,000-foot view across a whole portfolio of games to try and get a sense of where kind of direction of these games is going and making sure that everything's working, that we have the right kind of processes in place to make sure that everyone is being efficient, being transparent, setting out credible production plans, and working with them as much as possible to kind of build that trust with the different teams that we have to try and, deliver ultimately really great video games and do the best we can.
But what I'm interested, particularly, obviously, with it being a board game podcast, is can you tell me what your personal relationship is to board games or tabletop games? I mean, it was interesting for me that we went to university together and we spent all our time playing, I think it was PlayStation 2 at the time, games like SSX Tricky or Pro Evolution Soccer. And we probably both grew up enjoying board games, and yet we never really talked about it. So, is this a recent thing for you, or is it a childhood thing that you've rediscovered a bit like I did?
Well, no, I think it, as you say, it's really interesting because I did play a lot of board games when I was a kid. My family was really into it. I would play with my mum or sister. What sort of games did we play? Things like Game of Life. You ever played that? I mean, it's just basically glorified Ludo, right? Or Go for Broke, which was like the opposite one where you have to lose all your money or the game all your money. All these kind of very simple type games that you would play. I then sort of went through a phase of playing things like Space Crusade and Hero Quest and the whole smattering of the Games Workshop games like Blood Bowl. And, it was always very much a family thing. I do remember just being around at Christmas at my grandparents' house. It felt like a family thing. Now I do play board games with my kids. Before dinner, we would play for 15 minutes of a board game every single day. And that was lovely to kind of reignite it. But you're right, there was that kind of dip in the middle, maybe when, around about 20 or so, when I wasn't playing so many board games. What do you think? Do you think that's because that was a point at which we grew out of it, or there weren't the games to play? It felt like there was a real renaissance of board games maybe about 5 to 10 years after we were at uni, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be one reason, but the other reason is most likely that we both discovered alcohol and the opposite sex. I think given the two options at the time at the age of sort of 2021 of would you like to go and play this game or would you like to go clubbing, I think the one seemed a bit more attractive than the other.
I don't see why the two can't coexist. Why can't you bring a game of Jungle Speed into an indie nightclub? I mean, I see no contradiction here. This sounds bang on.
In your workplace then, is it the fact that most of the people in your industry are interested in board games? Is there like a big Venn diagram of tabletop gamers and video game designers? Is it quite common that people love board games that you work with?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think if you make games, then you're interested in how games are made. And so, I think there is a bit of a difference between people working on the development side and people working on the publishing side. But, I've worked very closely with a lot of studios. And if you walk around any of our studios like Creative Assembly, Amplitude, Sports Interactive, who make the Football Manager games, you will see just stacks of board games, whether that's like Wingspan or Zombicide, or people will get them out at lunchtime or have board gaming nights in the evening. But, even at the kind of publishing office, I actually used to run with a group of people who would all play games at lunchtime. I think the first one that we all played together, someone got off Kickstarter. If you've ever played Zombicide?
No, but I am familiar with it as a game.
Right.
Well, a little bit familiar with it as a game. I've seen pictures and kind of get the general idea of it.
It's a billion little miniatures, as with these kind of Kickstarter things, right? And there are lots of little zombies, but each of you has a character, a little kind of miniature character, and on a grid system, you all have different weapons, and you will take it in turns to go and smash zombies in the face. Super simple, but worked really well as a kind of gateway board game for everyone to do it. And, we would have these evenings where you'd get McDonald's in, people have a couple of drinks, and we would just play through board games of the evening. And, we were playing things like a Love Letter or Sushi Go Party, or I think we played 2 rooms in a boom once, like 20 of us, all in different rooms trying to have these social deduction games moving from one to the other. It was really fantastic. I think we found the limit of it when we tried picking up Pandemic Legacy, and
Yeah.
tried to play that every lunchtime. And it's just like, okay, we've only got an hour to run through a scenario of Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic Legacy being a cooperative game where you're trying to cure an illness globally across the world. But because of the legacy aspects, where every game that you play, it means that you've got management to do afterwards. You've got to upgrade a certain thing. You've got to add a certain element. You've got to unlock some new enemies or anything like that. It's like, oh God, not only do we have to try and find a cure for a certain disease, not only do we have to make sure we don't run out of cards, not only do we have to make sure that, we have enough resources, but we actually have a real life actual resource of 60 minutes before we've all got to go back to work. And so just like, okay, look, I know you're thinking really hard about this, but you actually do have to like get on with this and get moving. But it's, it's nice because everyone's, it's a nice atmosphere because ultimately you're surrounded with people who care about the same things that you do. And that is everything in a workplace.
Well, I've asked you the question, is there a Venn diagram between people who work in the video game industry and board gamers? And I think you've solidly answered that with a yes if you're playing Pandemic Legacy during a lunch break. Yeah. I mean, that sounds dreamy to me, but I can understand why that one maybe pushed it.
It was a stretch, yeah.
And what are you playing at the moment then? What's the games that you're playing in your spare time? Maybe not at work, but at home?
It's actually interesting you say that because, as I was saying before, when my kids were a little bit younger, we would play for 15 minutes every single day. We would play like Love Letter, Skull, all these kind of little pocket-sized games that you could, get done and rinse through in a short amount of time. And lately, because the kids are getting a bit older and because grown-ups are a bit less interesting to teenagers, it's taken a bit of a fallow thing. But there is one game that has kind of captured us again. It's brought everyone together and kind of do it. And it's a game that actually we talked about when we were on a train to Manchester a few weeks ago. And it's one that I was really surprised that you'd not heard of. It is a game that is based on a video game. It is a game called Dorfromantik. And this is not something that you'd heard of, right?
No, not originally, but since then I remedied that error. It won the Spiel des Jahres, didn't it? So it was a real entry game. And did you just say that it was video game first, board game after?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so it was originally released around 5 years ago, I think it was. It's like 2020, April 2020 it first came out. It actually came out of a game jam called Ludum Dare, which is ultimately, a game jam is where some coders and some artists and people all come together. They try and make a game within a very short period of time, usually like 48 hours a weekend, something like that. And it was very board game inspired. The game, the way that it works here, they did a much bigger version of it, a kind of early access version. It kind of expanded out from this original kind of prototype of the game jam. Imagine that you have a tower of hexagonal tiles. So the whole great stack of them, right? And on these tiles, you have like a little landscape. And so on each of these edges, it might have different biomass. So it might be wheat fields, it might be forests, it might be little houses, there's like rails and rivers. And the idea is that you put them down on this virtual tabletop and you want to try and get similar sides together. So for instance, you're trying to get the forest next to the forest, you're trying to get the wheat field next to the wheat field, so that you eventually, the more that you put down, the bigger these forests get. And you put each one down with a very little sort of pleasing snap to it. It feels very kind of, even though it's digital, it feels super tactile. It feels really nice. And so as you go along to kind of, so it's not just a kind of freeform thing, you're given these little quests saying, hey, can you make a forest of, 10 tiles? Or can you make a housing thing that has like 150 people in it? So it starts spiraling. It starts getting bigger and bigger, and it kind of starts spreading out over this virtual table. And the bigger that they get, the more little animations you see on it. There's like little birds that are flying around, or a house might have a little chimney with smoke coming out the top, or a railway might have a little train chuffing its way along the track. And it's just growing. It feels more and more alive. But you have a limited number of tiles. There's only so big you can make it. And the only way of expanding the number of tiles is by completing these quests. And so you've got this tension of, okay, I want to kind of match up together, but can I try and rinse through these quests as quickly as possible? Because the more quests I get done, the more tiles I can get, the bigger a kind of space I can get, the more I can spread out this world into, like, and if I build it in a certain direction, maybe I can capture this other little bit that'll get me a bonus tile. Maybe it'll do more stuff. And it's just like, it's so tactile. It feels very nostalgic. It feels like you are building this little chocolate box world where things snap together and it feels very old-fashioned. It's a really cozy game.
Yeah, I've heard it's a really relaxing experience that people play. You can play it solo as well, can't you? Well, presumably the video game was.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of, it feels, as I say, very tactile. It's about building order out of chaos, and that's why it kind of feels so nice. And but when the thing about it is when you play, you kind of go, oh, so this is based on the board game, right? And at the time they were like, no, we've just made this digitally. And so the fact that then they made a board game out of it, it's like, oh, this just works. This is just lovely.
And have you got both editions then? You got the board game and the video game version?
Yeah. So I picked up. I convinced my youngest son to get it for Christmas.
I do that often, actually. I've got about 6 or 7 that I think you should get this for your birthday. It's really good. Terrible parenting.
But it worked. He liked it. Both liked it. It was fine. It's all worked out fine.
So between the two, then, what's the board game lost that the video game has, or vice versa?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think what it's more about what it's gained, really. Because I mean, there's some things it can't do. It can't have a little animation. You can't build it quite so big. You've got a limited number of tiles, so you can't spread that much. The quests and challenges you do are a little bit smaller, a little more self-contained. But there's a couple of really nice things you get by having it as a board game. Firstly, as much as you get that kind of tactile sense of what it is on the screen, it's something very nice about picking up those little tiles and snapping them down. And the pieces are made really nice little wooden ones that feel really just sort of nice and sort of solid in terms of how they're built. But also you're doing it together. You're doing it around a table with your friends or with your family. And there's a sense of that kind of completion doing it together. I mean, so we have a bit of a kind of routine, like a tradition when we can complete the quest, when someone scored points. It's like everyone pauses, looks down and goes, little round of applause. Very well done. Well done, everyone. Yeah, it's very good. It just feels like it's something that's very nice. I think one of the things that video games do very well that historically board games couldn't do is not just about the kind of moment-to-moment gameplay or even the kind of minute-to-minute gameplay. It's about that hour longer term engagement that you have. A video game can do that by adding more mechanics and other stuff. And really, with this, they've maintained that by adding legacy elements too. You have, I think, 6 or 7 boxes with extra cards, extra rules, extra tokens, all these extra things. And there's something just so nice about, when you achieve a certain, about opening a new box.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's nothing better than that, really. I didn't know that they'd made Dorfromantik a legacy game. Actually, I had no idea they'd done that.
No, it's good. So you're physically adding new tiles to the stack that you've got, and you've got this nice big sort of printed out bit of paper, stacks of them, in fact, so you can run it through multiple times. Where you are, the better that you do, you're opening up new pathways. You can choose which way you're going. You can decide which order you want to do it. There's a lot of kind of direction that it allows you to take. It's really lovely. I mean, the only last thing that I would say that is worth knowing about Dorfromantik is that if you also have a copy of Memoir 44, so Memoir 44 is like deep involved World War II war game, and the important thing of that to note there is that the hex tiles for that game are exactly the same size as the ones for Dorfromantik. So if you want to, you can build up this lovely, like old-fashioned, really cozy, nostalgic world that you've sort of built there. That everything's really cozy and nice, and then you can wage war against it with all your Memoir 44 pieces after that. So if you want to have a bit of a hack there, then that kind of works too.
I'm sure somebody's probably done something official between the two games. Annoyingly, one of the worst decisions we ever made with the podcast was the branding of it with 20 Minute Tabletop, because I'm already looking at the timer now thinking that I've overrun. But I do want to talk to you about a few more things. Would you be happy to do another episode in the future just where we could maybe pick up from here? Because I feel like we've only just started scratching the surface about this particular topic area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we said, there's so much overlap between what board games can do and what video games can do. And also how I kind of feel they've learned so much from each other and how it is a really kind of interdependent art form. So yeah, I'd love to talk more about it.
Well, we will definitely get you back on, but for now, I'm going to have to say thank you and goodbye. So you're back to just me now, and before I say goodbye, I'm just going to pass on a little bit of news to you. Rowan has agreed to come back on the podcast to talk about one of his real passions of gaming, which is Dungeons and Dragons. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with Rowan weekly over the lockdown period, and he has carried that on ever since. Well, I have mentioned before on the podcast once or twice that I've got a few reservations about the game. Not that I dislike it, and I could probably start talking about it now, but I won't. I'll save it for the podcast. But Rowan is a massive fan, so we were going to get back together and talk about that particular brand of game when we next speak. And all that's left to do now is to say to you all listening, please do pop in and say hello to either of us on the Discord server if you wish. We have got a Discord server linked in the show descriptions. Rowan's on there, I'm on there, Kev's on there, Norm is on there. In fact, Neil is on there, Matt is on there. All the guests that we've had on the show are there. So if there's anything that you want to chat to any of us about, then we'd be more than happy to welcome you into that small community that we've got going on there. And so do pop in and say hi. Other than that, if you want to support the show in another way, then please do consider visiting our Patreon page. We'd much appreciate that. And I'm not going to talk about that too much now, as we explained it in episode 20, but do have a look. Once again, thank you so much for listening.